The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Federal Courthouse in Richmond, Virginia, casting long shadows across the marble floors as 72-year-old Colonel William Bill Patterson, U.S. Army, walked slowly through the main entrance. His weathered hands gripped a simple manila folder, and his silver hair was neatly combed beneath a well-worn baseball cap that read Vietnam Veteran in faded gold letters. Bill had served his country for 30 years, 3 tours in Vietnam, 2 in the Gulf War, and countless peacekeeping missions around the world. After retiring from the military, he had spent another 25 years on the federal bench as a United States District Judge, presiding over some of the most important cases in Virginia's legal history. But today, he wasn't here in any official capacity. He was simply an old man trying to resolve a minor legal matter involving his late wife's estate. The courthouse was bustling with the usual morning activity. Lawyers in expensive suits hurried past with their briefcases. Court clerks shuffled stacks of documents, and security guards monitored the metal detectors. Bill moved at his own pace, his slight limp, a souvenir from Vietnam, causing him to favor his left leg. As he approached the information desk, he could hear voices from a nearby seating area where several young attorneys were waiting for their cases to be called. "Look at this guy," one of them muttered, gesturing toward Bill, another confused old-timer who probably got lost on his way to the VA hospital. The speaker was Derek Morrison, a 28-year-old lawyer from a prestigious firm, impeccably dressed and carrying himself with the arrogance that often came with an Ivy League education and a wealthy family background. Beside him sat his colleague, Amanda Chen, equally polished and equally dismissive of anyone who didn't fit their image of legal sophistication. "I swear, these old guys think they can just wander into federal court and figure things out as they go," Amanda added with a laugh. "Half of them can barely remember what they had for breakfast, let alone navigate complex legal procedures." Bill overheard the comments but said nothing. He had dealt with arrogant young lawyers before, both as a military officer and as a judge. He knew that respect was earned, not given, and he had no interest in demanding recognition from people who weren't willing to offer basic courtesy. At the information desk, Bill politely asked the clerk about filing procedures for estate documents. The clerk, a kind middle-aged woman named Patricia, began explaining the process when Derek Morrison approached, apparently having overheard the conversation. "Excuse me," Derek interrupted, his tone patronizing, "but I couldn't help but notice you seem a bit overwhelmed. The state law can be pretty complicated for someone without legal training." Bill looked up at the young man, his blue eyes calm but alert. "I appreciate your concern, son, but I think I can manage." Derek smiled condescendingly. "Look, no offense, but I see this all the time. Veterans, God bless you for your service, but you guys often get in over your heads with legal stuff. Why don't you let someone who actually knows what they're doing take a look at your situation?" "That's very kind of you," Bill replied evenly, "but I've dealt with estate matters before." Amanda Chen joined them, having overheard the exchange. "Sir, with all due respect, estate law has changed dramatically over the years. What you might remember from decades ago probably isn't relevant anymore. These young men are right. You really should have profession representation." Bill studied both lawyers for a moment. "I assume you both practice estate law." "Among other things," Derek replied with obvious pride. "We handle complex litigation, corporate law, federal regulations, Harvard law," he added, as if that explained everything. "Georgetown," Amanda chimed in, not to be outdone. "Impressive," Bill said quietly. "And how long have you been practicing?" 4 years, Derek announced confidently. "Amanda here just made partner track at our firm. We're the youngest associates to ever." 4 years, Bill repeated thoughtfully. "That's quite a start." The clerk, Patricia, had been watching the exchange with growing discomfort. She had worked at the courthouse for 15 years and had seen enough to recognize when someone was being unfairly dismissed. "Sir," she said to Bill, "if you'd like to proceed with your filing, I can help you with the paperwork." Derek stepped closer. "Patricia, I really think this gentleman would benefit from proper legal counsel. These estate matters can be tricky, and at his age," he let the implication hang in the air. Bill set his folder down on the counter. "Young man, what exactly makes you think I can't handle my own legal affairs?" Derek glanced at Amanda, who gave him an encouraging nod. Well, sir, no disrespect intended, but you're clearly from a different generation. Legal procedures have become much more sophisticated. The terminology alone has evolved significantly since you would have had any experience with this kind of thing. I see, Bill said calmly. So you believe that age automatically disqualifies someone from understanding legal concepts? Not disqualifies, Amanda jumped in, but let's be realistic. The law is incredibly complex now. It takes years of intensive study to really grasp the nuances of federal procedure, constitutional interpretation, precedent analysis. Bill nodded slowly. You're absolutely right that the law is complex. Tell me, in your 4 years of practice, how many federal cases have you argued? Derek straightened up, sensing a challenge. I've been co-counsel on several major cases. Federal litigation is actually one of my specialties. Co-counsel, Bill repeated. So you've never been lead counsel in federal court? Well, no. But that's standard for junior associates. You have to work your way up. Of course. And Amanda, what about you? Same situation, she replied, though less confidently than before. The senior partners handle the actual arguments, but we do significant research and case preparation. Bill opened his folder and pulled out a single document. I wonder if you might help me understand something. I'm looking at this estate planning document, and there's a reference to something called per stirps distribution. Could you explain what that means? Derek and Amanda exchanged glances. It was a basic legal term, but Bill's manner of asking made them suddenly uncertain. Per stirps, Derek began carefully, refers to a method of distributing assets in an estate. Yes? Bill prompted. Where the distribution follows bloodlines, Derek continued, less confidently. So if a beneficiary predeceases the testator, their share goes to their descendants. That's essentially correct, Bill agreed. Now, can you tell me how that differs from per capita distribution in cases involving intestate succession under Virginia state law versus federal estate tax implications? The question hung in the air. Derek's confident expression began to falter, and Amanda shifted uncomfortably. That's getting into some pretty specialized territory, Derek admitted. Those kinds of distinctions would require research into specific statutes. Would they? Bill asked mildly. And yet you suggested that modern law is too complex for someone of my generation to understand. A small crowd had begun to gather around the information desk. Other lawyers, court clerks, and visitors had noticed the exchange, and word was spreading that something interesting was happening. Patricia, the clerk, was trying to suppress a smile. She had suspected from the beginning that there was more to Bill Patterson than met the eye. Sir, Amanda said, her voice taking on a slightly defensive tone, we were just trying to be helpful. Estate law really is complicated, and it certainly is, Bill agreed. For instance, can either of you cite the precedent established in Helvering v. Ringelholtz regarding the valuation of estate assets for tax purposes? Both lawyers stared blankly. What about the implications of the Tax Reform Act of 1976 on generation-skipping transfers? Silence. Or perhaps you could explain the difference between a charitable remainder trust and a charitable lead trust, and when each might be appropriate under current IRS regulation. Derek's face had gone pale. Sir, those are incredibly specific questions. No one carries that level of detail in their head without research materials. Bill smiled for the first time that morning. You'd be surprised what you remember after spending enough time with these concepts. He pulled another document from his folder. Let me ask you something different. Have either of you ever heard of United States v. Morrison? Which Morrison? Amanda asked nervously. There have been several federal cases with that name. The 2000 Supreme Court case regarding the Commerce Clause and the Violence Against Women Act. Derek and Amanda looked at each other, clearly struggling. I'd need to look that up, Derek admitted. It's an important case, Bill continued conversationally. The court held that Congress exceeded its authority under the Commerce Clause when it enacted a federal civil remedy for victims of gender-motivated violence. Chief Justice Rehnquist wrote the majority opinion. It was a significant federalism decision. He paused, studying their faces. I remember it well. Because I was the district judge who originally ruled on the case before it went to the Supreme Court. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Derek's mouth fell open, and Amanda took a step backward as if she'd been physically struck. You're a judge," Derek stammered. "I was," Bill corrected gently. "United States District Judge William Patterson, Eastern District of Virginia. I served on the federal bench for 25 years before retiring 3 years ago." The crowd around the information desk had grown larger, and a hush fell over the area as people processed what they had just heard. Patricia, the clerk, was no longer trying to hide her smile. "Judge Patterson," she said warmly, "it's an honor to have you back in the courthouse." Bill nodded graciously. "Thank you, Patricia. I always enjoyed working with the courthouse staff." Derek and Amanda stood frozen, their faces burning with embarrassment as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. "Judge Patterson," Amanda said weakly, We had no idea. We sincerely apologize for assuming that an old man couldn't possibly understand legal concepts," Bill asked, his tone still mild, but carrying an unmistakable edge, "for suggesting that age disqualifies someone from participating in legal proceedings, for treating me like a confused child who wandered into the wrong building." Neither lawyer could meet his eyes. "Your Honor," Derek began, using the formal address instinctively, "we made a terrible error in judgment." Yes, you did," Bill agreed. "But let me ask you something. Do you think this is the first time you've made assumptions about someone based on their appearance, their age, or your perception of their capabilities?" The question hung in the air like an indictment. Bill reached into his folder one more time and pulled out a photograph. It showed a much younger version of himself in military dress uniform, decorated with ribbons and medals. "Before I became a federal judge," he said quietly, "I spent 30 years serving this country in the United States Army. I commanded troops in combat, made life-and-death decisions under fire, and earned these decorations through service and sacrifice." He indicated the Vietnam Service Medal, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart visible in the photograph. "After retiring from the military, I went to law school, Georgetown as it happens, and then spent a quarter-century presiding over federal cases, including death penalty appeals, constitutional challenges, and complex civil rights litigation." He put the photograph back in his folder. "I'm telling you this not to impress you, but to illustrate a point. You dismissed me entirely based on superficial observations. You saw an old man with a limp and a veteran's cap, and you immediately concluded that I was incompetent, confused, and in need of your guidance." The courthouse lobby had grown very quiet. Other lawyers, clerks, and visitors were listening intently to the exchange. "What concerns me," Bill continued, "is not just how you treated me, but how you might treat other people who don't fit your narrow definition of competence. How many elderly clients have you dismissed? How many working-class people have you talked down to? How many individuals have you underestimated because they didn't wear expensive suits or speak with Ivy League accents?" Derek and Amanda exchanged anguished glances. Around them, people were watching with expressions ranging from sympathy to disgust. "Your Honor," Derek said desperately, "we truly apologize. We made unforgivable assumptions, and we're deeply sorry for our disrespect." Bill studied both young lawyers for a long moment. "Apologies are a start," he said finally. "But what matters more is what you learn from this experience." He turned to address the broader crowd that had gathered. "I want everyone here to understand something. Respect isn't about titles or positions or the degrees on your wall. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of every person you encounter, regardless of their age, appearance, or circumstances." He looked back at Derek and Amanda. "You both clearly have intelligence and education, but intelligence without wisdom is dangerous, and education without humility is worthless. The law isn't just about knowing statutes and procedures. It's about serving people, all people, with fairness and respect." Patricia, the clerk, spoke up. "Judge Patterson, would you like to proceed with your estate filing?" Bill smiled at her. "Thank you, Patricia. Yes, I would." As he approached the counter, Derek stepped forward hesitantly. "Your Honor, if there's anything we can do to make this right." Bill paused. "There is something you can do, anything, Amanda said quickly. Learn from this. Remember how it felt to be corrected, and use that memory to guide how you treat others. The law is a noble profession, but only if we use it to serve all people with dignity and respect. As Bill completed his paperwork with Patricia's assistance, word of the encounter spread throughout the courthouse. Lawyers who had witnessed the exchange shared the story with colleagues, and by lunchtime, it had reached the chambers of several sitting judges. One of those judges, the Honorable Margaret Chen, Amanda's aunt, though she didn't learn this until later, was particularly interested in the story. She had known Judge Patterson for many years and had tremendous respect for both his military service and his judicial career. That afternoon, Judge Chen called Derek Morrison and Amanda Chen to her chambers for a private conversation about professionalism and respect in the legal profession. The meeting was courteous but firm, and both young lawyers left with a clear understanding that their behavior had been noted by the federal judiciary. Word of the incident also reached the senior partners at their law firm. Within a week, both Derek and Amanda found themselves enrolled in mandatory diversity and sensitivity training, with a strong suggestion that they volunteer their time at legal aid clinics to better understand the clients they served. The story spread beyond the courthouse as well. Legal blogs picked up the account, and it became a cautionary tale shared in law schools about the importance of humility and respect in the legal profession. But perhaps the most significant impact was on Derek and Amanda themselves. Both lawyers later credited the encounter as a turning point in their careers and their approach to the law. Derek began volunteering at a veterans legal clinic, helping former service members navigate benefits claims and other legal issues. Working with elderly veterans gave him a deep appreciation for the knowledge and experience that comes with age and service. Amanda started mentoring young lawyers from disadvantaged backgrounds, helping them navigate the often intimidating world of federal practice. She became an advocate for treating all clients with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. 6 months after the courthouse encounter, both lawyers received an unexpected invitation to lunch from Judge Patterson. He had heard about their volunteer work and wanted to acknowledge their growth. Over sandwiches at a quiet restaurant near the courthouse, Bill shared more stories from his military and judicial career, offering insights into the law that no textbook could provide. "Your Honor," Derek said during their meal, "I want you to know that meeting you changed how I practice law. I realize now that experience and wisdom can't be measured by age or appearance." Amanda nodded in agreement. "We both learned more from that one conversation than we did in 4 years of law school." Bill smiled. "That's kind of you to say. But remember, the real test isn't whether you've learned from one mistake. It's whether you apply that learning consistently, especially when no one is watching." As they finished their lunch, Bill pulled out his wallet and showed them a photo of his late wife Eleanor, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. "Eleanor was a high school teacher for 40 years, he said quietly. "She used to tell me that the most important lessons aren't the ones you learn from books. They're the ones you learn from treating people with respect and kindness, even when they can't do anything for you in return." Derek and Amanda listened intently as Bill continued. "In the military, I learned that leadership isn't about commanding respect through rank or authority. It's about earning respect through your actions and your character. The same principle applies to the law." He put the photo away and looked at both young lawyers. "You both have promising careers ahead of you, but your success won't be measured by the cases you win or the money you make. It will be measured by how many lives you touch positively, how many people you help, and how much dignity you bring to the practice of law." As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Amanda asked, "Judge Patterson, do you have any advice for young lawyers trying to build a practice based on respect and service?" Bill thought for a moment. "Remember that every client who walks through your door is someone's parent, child, or spouse. They're dealing with problems that are very real and very important to them, even if they seem routine to you. Treat them the way you would want your own family treated." He paused. "And never forget that you don't know everything, no matter how much education you have. Stay humble, keep learning, and always be willing to listen. The moment you think you have nothing left to learn is the moment you stop being an effective advocate." A year later, Derek Morrison and Amanda Chen had both been promoted within their firm, not because of their legal victories, but because of their reputation for treating clients with exceptional respect and dignity. Their colleagues began referring challenging cases to them, knowing that they would handle them with sensitivity and care. Derek's work with veterans led to him being invited to speak at law schools about the importance of serving underrepresented populations. Amanda's mentorship program had grown into a formal initiative that her firm now sponsored, helping dozens of young lawyers from disadvantaged backgrounds enter federal practice. And Judge Patterson continued to frequent the courthouse, not as a practicing attorney, but as someone who enjoyed staying connected to the legal community he had served for so many years. Occasionally, young lawyers would approach him with questions about law or life, and he was always generous with his time and wisdom, but he never again encountered the kind of dismissive treatment he had received that morning from Derek and Amanda. Perhaps the legal community had learned something from their encounter, or perhaps respect, once demonstrated, has a way of rippling outward, touching everyone it encounters. In any case, Judge William Patterson continued to serve as a quiet reminder that wisdom comes in many forms, that experience deserves recognition, and that true authority is earned through service, sacrifice, and the consistent practice of treating all people with dignity. The law, he often said, is not just about what you know, it's about how you use what you know to make the world a little more just, one case and one interaction at a time.